So I hope everyone sees me. Good morning and hears me. Sorry I can't be physically with you today, a courtesy of a most unfortunate encounter last week called COVID. So it's better I keep it for myself and not for you. So welcome anyway to this second edition of the High-Level Expert Forum on Sustainable Finance. And since the first edition, we have all witnessed the outcome of COP27. And I don't know about you, but today I am quite frustrated. So little progress towards saving the Earth as a planet hospitable to humankind. So, okay, we can blame the policymakers, we can blame the finance industry, and sometimes with very valid arguments. And many of you, perhaps, and I, for sure, have done it to blame these guys and are doing it and will continue to do it. And even today, and in fact, I will be the first, as you will see. But just for this introductory moment, just let's take a step back and ask ourselves who are the agents most responsible for making our planet sustainable for humankind. And I have a slide on that. Here it is. Yes, before blaming all these people, I think the first person responsible is we citizens. Then, of course, the policymakers, corporations, yes, of course. But then, and that will be my last point, to open this today conference today is, but who is funding these corporations? In the end investors, it is again us citizens. So let me explain quickly why I see it like this. And first, starting with citizens, and I'm talking about citizens as human beings at this stage, not only and not primarily as savers and investors. And yeah, as we often say, charity begins at home. And you will see in the statistics along all these 2 days, how much we citizens, so-called households in the statistics, how much we pollute. But the good news is that together, we can be the most powerful pro-environmental agent. And I like this quote from a French writer who describes us as grains of sand on a beach. So, of course, as one grain of sand, what can I do to save the beach? But without the grains of sand, there would be no beach. So together, we can make a huge difference. So, and I will leave it as this, as far as we citizens are directly concerned, but I tell myself I must start asking, what is my PSP, my personal sustainability plan, my current CO2 footprint, my target one, and this, as you know, you can test on the internet. So, of course, not far behind come, that's my second point, the policymakers. And for one simple reason is that environmental issues are what economists identified long ago as externalities. And the free markets, the Adam Smith's famous invisible hand, cannot work on environmental issues. So, of course, EU policymakers should do a lot for the environment. But are they acting at the right level? Let's look at the CO2 emissions to fossil fuels per region of the globe, sorry. And yeah, so what do these graphs tell us? 93% and growing part of the CO2 emissions are not generated within the EU, 93%. And remember that CO2 emissions no borders, like any air pollution or water pollution. So the main power of the EU to influence this 93% of humankind's CO2 emissions is, of course, and I'm fortunately not the only one to say it, but I want to emphasize it today, is the carbon tax at the EU borders. Now, what else can EU public powers do? Well, on this 7% and shrinking part of CO2 emissions that are under their control, under the EU policymakers' control. So let's look this time at the situation in the EU. Here it is. So we will have ample time to discuss all these activities, contribution, etc. during these 2 days. But let me take for the introduction just one specific example, building and housing, in my view, the #1 culprit. Why? Because the building sector is 40% of EU emissions, and 36% of final energy use stems from buildings. And look at the red part on the top. These are quarterly histograms, and you will see that every autumn and winter, it explodes, the red part. And the red part is our direct CO2 emissions, and of course, that is home heating. That is why home energy efficiency investments are so important. And the question for public authorities, EU public authorities, is that clearly identified in the taxonomy? And more importantly, is that clearly identified in what is becoming the de facto this day dominant green label for funds, is this EU Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, SFDR, which classifies funds between the dark green, this so-called Article 9, the light green, so-called Article 8, and the other ones, Article 6. So where are the home energy efficiency investments classified? What we need is, next to the carbon tax from policymakers, is clear and practical rules from them that will give the right regulatory carrots and sticks to guide all the investments in the right direction. Last point, yes, environment and energy efficiencies have also to do with the allocation of household savings, we citizens as long-term savers and investors. So, and there is one very simple reason, is that we are by far the main source of funding of all investments, directly or indirectly, sustainable or not sustainable, and I will prove it to you right now. If you look at the lower end table, lower right table, sorry, you will see that, for example, last year, we, as I told you, we are called households in the statistics, we provided excess financing of 25 trillion euros to the EU economy, which has been used by the private sector, what is called here non-financial corporations, 16 trillion, and the public sector, which is called general government, 8.8 trillion. The rest, as you see, has much little impact. The problem is, so we know where the money is. It is with us. But it is not, as you will see in the upper left corner, and that's where the big part of the problem is, it is not invested mostly directly into the economy. As you can see, listed debt securities, listed shares, equity represent together less than 10% of our financial savings. More than 80% are captured by intermediaries, by banks, 40%, by insurers, and pension providers for almost 40% as well. So how can we help? But how can policymakers, issuers of debt and equity, and especially the financial intermediaries, these banks, insurers, pension providers, asset managers I mentioned, what should they do to help us put our money to work for ESG matters? Firstly, they must bring facts and science to citizens in a clear and digestible way. And they should not shy away from their responsibilities and duties, and not only ask to, I must say, mainly uninformed and too often Twitter brainwash people about what could be their sustainability preferences. That alone will not work, and I would summarize a lot by picking only two things we badly need. First, we need mandatory, reliable, comparable, intelligible, and short non-financial disclosures. For example, if I could get only A, the current CO2 footprint of a corporation or of a retail investment product, and B, its 10 to 20-year footprint target of the same retail investment product or corporation would make a huge difference compared to being only asked at the retail point of sale, what are your sustainability preferences? The other thing, which is even more important, is we need engaged, not disengaged investing. And whenever possible, even impact investing. In fact, the opening presentation from last year's conference from our partner To Degree Investing showed quite clearly among the fund investment strategies, the least effective, which is negative screening, called exclusion, which I call disengagement, and the most effective investment approach, engagement for saving the planet. To finish, let me show you what I want to do. I want this thing that you have on the right side. I want to be able, as a citizen and as a long-term saver, to have a real say on climate and on all ESG matters, of my investee companies, whether I invest directly or indirectly with them using my smartphone. This is what we, pension savers, investors, all should do, and that is what EU and national policymakers should enable us, empower us to do. For example, by enforcing as soon as possible the Shareholders' Rights Directive #2, so that we can vote or proxy vote our investments directly or indirectly, easily and freely within the whole EU. And also, we need an implementation of the Capital Market Union Action Plan that would streamline, modernize the process, the engagement process, so that we can do it easily and quickly on our smartphone. This is where all the current key EU financial policy priorities should converge and focus. Sustainable finance, digital finance, retail investor strategy, capital market union. So let's do it. Let's enable and empower, at last, citizens as long-term pension savers and investors. For me, this is the new paradigm for the future of the planet, of our economic system, and of our democracy. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the conference.